She lay awake in his bed, moonlight slanting across the hardwood floor like some silent witness to their tangled limbs. She listened to his breathing slow, memorizing the hitch of air in his chest when she traced circles on his ribs. Everything about him felt too real, too raw. His smell of soap and old books, the way his fingers curled possessively even in sleep. When she closed her eyes, she saw his laugh lines, the worry that darkened his brow when he let himself remember why he didn't trust people. She wanted to be better for him. She wanted to be honest. But honesty was a currency she didn't have enough of. She held her breath and pretended she was exactly the woman he thought she was. The light clung to her like perfume, sweet and poisonous. Arturo was nothing like she expected. Not the cold shark she'd assumed, but a man who burned with conviction. He'd talk about justice with a clenched jaw, then break off mid-sentence, embarrassed by his own vehemence. He brought her to his apartment with its battered bookshelves, stained rugs, the windows that rattled in the wind. He cooked for her once, badly, cursing at the smoke alarm while she laughed so hard she cried. It was intimacy she'd never dared to hope for. He trusted her with small embarrassments, with dreams he'd buried under work and duty. And every time he touched her, it felt like confession. She wanted to match him truth for truth. She just didn't know how to start. Sometimes he'd catch her staring at him with an expression she couldn't explain. He'd smile like he was flattered but wary, asking softly, "What are you thinking?" She'd swallow lies and offer half-truths. "I'm thinking I'm lucky." It wasn't even false. She was lucky, absurdly so. He was the kind of man who remembered how she took her coffee, who bought second-hand poetry books for her. Just because. But every time she smiled back, her stomach twisted. It felt like stealing from him. She wanted to tell him the truth, but telling would mean losing this. And she was so damn tired of losing. They talked late into the night about everything except the things that mattered most. He shared old scars, like the way his father had taught him to win every argument, but never how to say sorry. How he was raising his sister alone after their parents died, and he wasn't sure if he was doing it right. She loved him for those vulnerabilities, for the way his voice cracked when he talked about family. She felt him folding her into his life like a promise. But the entire time, her head buzzed with guilt like a swarm of wasps. She was gathering information, even as she kissed him. Her notes to the editor lay hidden under her bed. The morning he handed her a key to his apartment, she felt like vomiting. His hand trembled just slightly, as if he wasn't sure she'd accept it. He didn't say he loved her, not in so many words, but she heard it anyway. She closed her fingers around the key and smiled so wide it hurt her face. Later, alone, she wept in his shower until the water ran cold. She had told herself she was only using him for the story, but now she wanted him too much to pretend. She practiced confessions in the mirror. She rehearsed apologies. But every time she tried to tell him the truth, the words died on her tongue. He started noticing things she couldn't hide. The silences that stretched too long. The way she'd glance away when he asked where she'd been. One night, after she got back late from meeting with the editor, he was waiting by the window, arms folded. His voice was calm, but it had that lawyer's edge she'd come to fear. "What are you not telling me, Clara?" She felt the lie trying to claw its way out of her throat. She almost broke. Instead, she swallowed, clenched her fists. "Nothing. I'm just scared." His eyes softened then, which made it worse. He kissed her forehead like she was fragile. She hated herself for letting him. When he introduced her to Julia, it felt like being offered a piece of his soul. His sister was wary, quick to judge, but she watched them with a curiosity that hurt. Clara tried to be kind, to be worthy. She helped wash dishes after dinner, laughed at Julia's sarcastic jokes, sat with her on the balcony, talking about music. She wanted so badly to belong. She almost told him everything that night, voice catching on the edge of confession. But Artur squeezed her hand under the table, warmth and trust flooding her. And she chose silence, because betrayal was easier than honesty. They started planning trips, weekends away to the coast. She caught herself picturing a future she had no right to. Her notebooks at home filled with observations for the article, names, dates, donations. The evidence of corruption she was supposed to expose. Except Artur wasn't guilty, not really. He was just close enough to burn when it all blew up. She thought maybe she could kill the piece, bury it. But the editor threatened her with debts, with her career's death rattle. She lied to Artur about where she was going, said she had family out of town. Instead, she sat in a sterile newsroom, selling him out one fact at a time. When the story hit the front page, she wanted to die. It wasn't just the headline that made her blood run cold. It was seeing her name printed underneath. A byline. A trophy of her betrayal. She called him 20 times that morning. He didn't answer. She ran to his apartment, hair unwashed, sobbing. Pounded on his door until her knuckles split. She heard movement inside, then silence so complete it felt like punishment. She pressed her face to the wood and whispered apologies he refused to hear. She left a note under the door. Then another. And another. All went unanswered. Her phone filled with angry messages, from readers, from colleagues, from his sister. Julia's words were the sharpest. How could you? He trusted you. Clara stopped eating. She stopped sleeping. She quit the paper, packed up her things in a cardboard box that felt too small for all the wreckage. When she tried to look at herself in the mirror, she saw nothing but a liar in borrowed clothes. Nights were the worst. She'd lie in bed, replaying the shape of his shoulders, the warmth of his breath against her neck, the quiet way he'd say, "Trust me." The irony tasted like blood. She haunted old places they used to go, the coffee shop with the crooked tables, the narrow park where he'd once kissed her so hard they both laughed. She thought if she sat there long enough, maybe she'd see him again. But the tables stayed empty. The park turned to winter. She left apologies scrawled in her journal, burned them in the sink. She tried writing him one last letter, but the page stayed blank. What could she say that wouldn't make it worse? That she was sorry? That she still loved him? That none of it had been fake except the parts that mattered most? She remembered the way he'd look at her, eyes squinting like he was trying to read her soul. The way he'd hold her wrist gently when she was about to say something important, like he was bracing himself for bad news. She used to think that was romantic. Now she saw it for what it was. A man desperate to trust her, knowing she'd let him down. She lay awake listening to the city traffic, the arguments in the hall, the scratch of mice in the walls. Her apartment felt like punishment. Even the plants on the windowsill drooped, starved for light. She didn't bother watering them. Some nights she picked up the phone to call him, thumb hovering over his name. Once she actually pressed it, held it to her ear, listening to the dead ring until voicemail kicked in. She didn't leave a message. What was there to say? I ruined you. I ruined us. She buried her face in the pillow and screamed. The neighbors banged on the wall for her to shut up. She shut up. She curled in on herself, cradling memories that felt like glass shards under her skin. No one came to check on her. And she told herself she deserved every second of it. At work she was a ghost. She'd show up late to the small, sad office that wasn't even hers anymore. Colleagues avoided her. Some muttered under their breath. She didn't blame them. She quit eventually without fanfare, boxed up the last of her things, left the security badge on the desk. She walked out into gray drizzle that soaked her through in seconds. She didn't run. She let it wash over her like punishment. Passing cars splashed her with dirty water. She barely noticed. She went home, stripped off the wet clothes, and sat on the floor wrapped in a towel until the cold finally made her shiver. She started writing letters she never sent. Dozens of them. Pages and pages of apologies, explanations, self-loathing. She left them in a shoebox under her bed. Sometimes she read them out loud to the empty apartment, voice cracking. "I love you. I love you. I'm sorry." She tried to imagine his face if he ever read them. The way his eyes would shudder. The disgust in his voice. She crumpled them up, smoothed them out again. She couldn't throw them away. They were the only evidence left that she still felt anything at all. When she dreamed, he was always there. Sometimes furious, spitting words that burned her. Sometimes silent, just looking at her with that broken expression that undid her. In the worst dreams, he forgave her. He held her like before, brushed hair from her face, said it would be okay. She'd wake up shaking, wanting to crawl out of her own skin. Sleep felt like betrayal. Reality was worse. She'd lie on the couch watching mold grow in the bathroom, knowing she was too tired to clean it, knowing she'd earned every bit of the rot. The city moved on without her. Headlines changed. The scandal faded, but Artur's reputation never fully recovered. She read about the foundation shuttering its old programs, restructuring to save face. She pictured him at board meetings, jaw tight, eyes shadowed. She tried to tell herself he was strong enough to survive, but she knew she'd left a stain on him that wouldn't wash out. When she thought about Julia, it felt like swallowing glass. She wondered if they talked about her, cursed her name. She hoped they did. It would mean she hadn't been forgotten. She couldn't go back to the person she was before him. That was the cruelest part. Even at her worst, she was still in love with him. It wasn't a pretty love anymore, not the giddy newness of their first nights. It was the kind of love that felt like debt, like a wound that wouldn't scab over. She missed his laugh, his terrible coffee, the way he listened like nothing else in the world mattered. She told herself she didn't deserve those memories, but she clung to them anyway, because they were all she had left. Some morning she woke up sure she'd call him that day, confess everything again, beg. By evening the resolve would wither. She'd tell herself it was for his sake, that he was better off not seeing her. It was easier to think that way. A small mercy in the wreckage. She'd stare at the ceiling until her eyes burned, replaying their last conversation over and over. His voice at the door, muffled and angry. The way he stopped answering. She didn't blame him. God, she would have shut the door on herself too. In the quiet moments, she'd wonder if he still thought of her. She hoped he didn't. She hoped he did. Both hopes hurt. She imagined him moving on, meeting someone who deserved him, someone who didn't lie, who wouldn't destroy everything he built. She'd try to picture it, force herself to be happy for him. But she'd always see herself there too, a ghost at the edge of the frame. Watching, wanting, unable to ever really let go. She didn't know if she ever would. He opened himself to her in ways he'd never dared before. Nights on that sagging couch, talking until sunrise, words spilling like blood from old wounds. She watched him run his fingers through his hair, pacing, vulnerable, confessing how failure terrified him. He let her see the mess, the fear, the man behind the perfect speeches. When she smiled at his softest truths, he kissed her like the world would end. In his kitchen, full of dying herbs he swore he'd revive, he cooked for her badly but earnestly. He traced her spine with trembling fingers in the dark, whispering that he felt safe with her. And she clung to him as if he were salvation, certain nothing could ever break this trust. But beneath the sheets, her secrets twisted like a knife she couldn't put down. Clara fell hard. Every look from him left her breathless. She memorized the scar on his eyebrow, the hush of his voice when he was tired, the way he said her name like it meant everything. She was undone by his hope, the broken boy pretending to be a man who saved the world. She could almost forget why she was really there. Almost. Because guilt slithered in every time he rested his head on her lap. She felt it when he handed her his keys, so proud, saying, "Now it's your home too." And she bit her tongue to keep from screaming. She loved him so much it burned. But she was also lying. Lying with every heartbeat. Sometimes she'd stand by his window at dawn, the city sprawling beneath them, trying to rehearse a confession. She'd mouth the words, "I'm betraying you. I'm selling you out." But they choked in her throat. Instead, she smiled at him over coffee and asked if he'd thought about adopting a cat. She laughed at his jokes, called him ridiculous when he tripped over his own feet. And she cried in the shower where he couldn't see her. She told herself she'd stop the deal, that she'd tell the editor no. But ambition poisoned everything. She wanted the story, the recognition, and she hated herself for wanting it. He noticed the distance before she did. One evening, wine half drunk on the table, he watched her pick at her food. His eyes dark, searching. "What aren't you telling me?" She laughed too quickly, too brightly, deflecting with a shake of her head. "I'm just tired. Work." But he didn't buy it. He pressed, voice cracking with worry. And she snapped, too sharp, too afraid. "Can we not do this?" His face fell. She felt it crack something in her chest. She grabbed his hand across the table, but he let it go. She wasn't lying when she told him she was afraid. But she was lying about everything else. Afraid of losing him. Afraid of losing the person she was with him. Afraid he'd see her for the fraud she was and turn away in disgust. She knew she was a coward. But she couldn't stop. The editor's voice rang in her ears. "This is big. This is your shot." She sent emails in secret, documents attached. She met him in cafes far from home, heart racing like a criminal. And every time she closed her laptop, she felt like she killed them both a little more. He introduced her to Julia one rainy Sunday, as if inviting her deeper into the sanctuary of his world. Julia was quiet, suspicious at first, but melted when Clara knelt down to talk softly, like she was someone safe. Clara almost confessed right then, tears gathering in her eyes. But when she looked at Artur, his hand protective on Julia's shoulder, something inside her screamed, "Don't ruin this." So she swallowed the truth and smiled. Later, alone in his bathroom, she vomited from the guilt. She rinsed her mouth and went back out pretending nothing was wrong. The final days before it all fell apart felt like living on borrowed time. Every touch felt desperate. She clung to him at night, burying her face in his chest, inhaling the scent she'd never smell again without flinching. He brushed hair from her face and told her he loved her in that broken, quiet way that made her ache. She bit her lip to keep from sobbing. She imagined telling him everything, begging him to run away with her before the truth exploded, but she never did. And each morning, she woke with more blood on her hands. The story broke like a bomb. Her name on the byline in bold. She hadn't even been the one to hit publish. The editor did, ahead of schedule. She tried to stop it, but it was too late. Newspapers on every corner had his foundation's name smeared in scandal. She felt her heart seize when she saw his face on TV. He wasn't guilty, but it didn't matter. The damage was done. She couldn't breathe. She screamed into her pillow until her voice broke. Then she ran to his apartment, hoping, praying, cursing herself all the way there. She banged on his door in the middle of the night, hair soaked from rain, mascara streaked. Her fists hurt from pounding. "Artur! Please!" She could hear movement inside. She knew he was there. She sobbed, voice hoarse, begging him to let her in. He didn't answer. Didn't even yell. Just silence. Like she didn't exist. She slid to the floor, shivering. Sent him message after message, her thumbs trembling. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Please talk to me." Nothing. She left voicemails, crying, whispering his name. Nothing. She wrote letters she knew he wouldn't read. Apologies that felt like digging her own grave. She'd wake up every day with hope and watch it die by afternoon when he didn't reply. She stayed outside his building once, watching the lights come on and off, imagining which window was his. She thought she saw him once, a silhouette pacing. She nearly ran to him, but the lights went out before she could move. She cried on the bus home, ignoring the stares of strangers. She couldn't forgive herself, and she knew he never would. Her job vanished like smoke. The scandal was good for headlines, but bad for trust. No one wanted to hire the girl who sold out the man she claimed to love. She avoided mirrors, avoided friends. She lived on instant noodles and stale coffee. She watched the plants he gave her die one by one, too sick to water them. Nights were the worst. She'd lie in bed remembering the feel of his chest under her palms, the way he whispered confia and mim. She would sob until she fell asleep, waking with her pillow wet. Some mornings she wrote him more letters she never sent. She wrote about the first night he kissed her, how her whole body trembled. About the time he got drunk and read poetry badly until they both collapsed laughing. About how she was sure he was the only good thing she'd ever have. She tore them all up. She didn't deserve to hold those memories. She didn't deserve to want him to remember them too. She wanted to be someone better, but it felt too late. When she tried to talk to her editor again, he acted like she was radioactive. "You got your name in lights," he said coldly. "Deal with the fallout." She wanted to hit him, wanted to scream, but all she did was nod numb. She took her things from the office in a cardboard box like some cliché. She didn't say goodbye to anyone. She left the building with her head down, hearing whispers behind her. She sat on the curb and let it all crash over her. She realized she had nowhere to go. Some nights she dreamed of confessing. In the dream, he opened the door. He was furious, shaking, but he listened. He called her a liar. She agreed. He called her cruel. She sobbed yes. He called her the love of his life. And she woke up crying, clutching her own body in the dark. In real life, there was no door opening. No chance to tell him the truth that might not fix anything but would at least be honest. So she just stayed silent, rotting in regret. She found herself replaying every second they had together. The way his eyes softened when he said he loved her. The husky laugh in bed at 2 a.m. The cautious hope in his voice when he talked about a future. And her stomach twisted with nausea because she'd ruined it all. Sometimes she whispered apologies to the empty room, as if he could hear her. She scared herself with how much she missed him. She would have given anything to turn back time. But all she had left was memory. When she walked by places they'd been, she'd cross the street or duck into an alley. She couldn't stand seeing the restaurant where he spilled wine on her dress and blushed like a teenager. She couldn't face the bookstore where they argued about which author was better. Every street felt haunted by him. Sometimes she caught herself smiling at nothing, then remembered and wanted to scream. She stopped going out as much. The world felt like it had shrunk to the size of her apartment. She let herself fall apart, truly fall apart. No makeup, hair unwashed, clothes in piles, bills unpaid. She didn't care. She lost weight because food made her sick. She stopped calling her mother. She didn't want to lie anymore, even by omission. The only thing she did was write. Letters she wouldn't send. Journal entries that were confessions to herself. She wrote "I love you" 100 times in red ink until the pen ran dry. It was the only thing she knew that was true anymore. She told herself she deserved this. Deserved the silence, the emptiness. Deserved to feel her bones ache with missing him. She pictured him hating her and agreed with him. Sometimes she wondered if he still thought about her at all. If he ever felt even a flicker of what she did. She'd lie awake all night imagining him moving on, meeting someone honest, laughing again. The thought gutted her, but she clung to it too, because he deserved that, even if she didn't. But there were moments when the guilt wasn't just self-punishment, when it was honest mourning. She grieved what they could have been, what she destroyed. She didn't hate him for shutting her out. She loved him more for it. He had boundaries, integrity. She was the one who broke the rules of love. She told herself maybe that was enough punishment, knowing she'd ruined the one thing she'd ever really wanted, and that he would never believe her love was real. She kept one thing of his, a hoodie he left at her place. She wore it until it smelled only of her. When it got holes, she stitched them up with shaking hands. She talked to it like a lunatic on bad nights, apologizing, confessing, begging for forgiveness no one would grant. It was pathetic. She knew it, but she couldn't let it go. It was proof he'd been there, that she hadn't imagined it all, that once, just once, someone like him had loved someone like her. Months crawled by with silence settling between them like a grave. She tried to rebuild herself in fragments. Therapy sessions where she sobbed into tissues until her throat was raw. Journals filled with apologies she couldn't send. She deleted his number, re-added it, deleted it again. When friends asked, she shook her head. "He's gone." No explanations. No excuses. On her best days, she almost felt human. On her worst, she wanted to disappear entirely. She learned to live with a dull throb of loss, like a bone that never healed right. Artur, meanwhile, shut the world out. He focused on Julia, on work that felt hollow without the trust he'd lost. He hated the way people looked at him now, pity or suspicion. He told himself he didn't think about her, lied to himself about deleting every picture. But late at night, he'd catch himself reading old texts until his eyes burned. He tried to hate her, to make it simple. But memories would ambush him, her laughter in his ear, her hand on his chest. He'd feel sick all over again. He felt like a fool, a man who couldn't protect anything. Julia asked about her once. He froze. The little girl traced patterns on the table and whispered, "She was nice." He swallowed back bitterness. "Yeah," he forced out. "She was." He didn't tell Julia the rest. Didn't explain betrayal. He didn't want her to see love that way yet. But when she went to sleep, he sat alone on the couch, fingers tangled in his hair, remembering how Clara cried the night she met Julia. He wondered if any of it had been real. Wondered why it still mattered. Clara tried to move on in the most mundane ways. She got a new job at a small publisher that didn't care about the scandal. She worked hard, stayed late, avoided office gossip. She took the bus every day, listening to music loud enough to drown out thought. She deleted social media. She stopped writing about love at all. She didn't dare. She paid her bills on time, cooked for herself, watered new plants she hoped wouldn't die. She told herself that was growth. But at night, she still dreamed of his hands on her face. There were days she convinced herself she'd leave the city, run somewhere no one knew her. A fresh start. But she never bought the train ticket. The city held too much of him. She was afraid to stay but terrified to go. She visited places they'd been like someone laying flowers on a grave. She'd sit on park benches and read the book he once mocked. She'd buy coffee from the vendor, who always asked after him. When the vendor asked where he was, she said, "Gone." The word tasted like blood. One evening, she saw him across the street. He hadn't seen her. He was holding Julia's hand, listening to her chatter with patient nods. Clara's breath left her in a rush. He looked older, tired. She almost called out, almost ran to him. But she stayed frozen, hidden by the crowd. When he turned away, she felt something in her chest collapse. She went home and cried until dawn, hugging the old hoodie so tightly the seams split. She decided she would never try to speak to him again. It would be Kinder. Artur tried to forget her too. He threw himself into rebuilding what the story had destroyed. Meetings, donations, public apologies for a scandal he didn't cause but couldn't deny. He lost friends, made new ones with wary hearts. He turned protective over Julia in a way that bordered on obsession. He didn't date, didn't trust, but in the loneliest moments, he whispered her name like a curse. He wanted to hate her, but hate was too clean. What he felt was Messier, love ruined by betrayal. Then, 1 year after it all fell apart, fate intervened. A charity event for the foundation she'd once tried to destroy. She didn't want to go. Her boss insisted. She told herself he wouldn't be there. When she saw him across the room, she nearly fled. He was talking to donors, all cool politeness. When their eyes met, time buckled. He went still. She felt the floor tilt. She made herself turn away, heart slamming so hard it hurt. But she felt his gaze burn between her shoulder blades all night. He avoided her for hours. She hovered near the wall, clutching her glass like a shield. She practiced breathing. Don't cry. Don't speak. But when he finally approached, she went cold all over. He stopped a foot away, voice low and careful. Can we talk? She shook her head, unable to look at him. Please. She hated the word in his mouth. She nodded once. They slipped out to the balcony, the city humming below them like an accusation neither could escape. They stood apart, arms crossed, both defensive and exhausted. He didn't speak at first, just studied her like he was trying to see if she was real. She broke the silence. Her voice cracked. I'm sorry. He flinched. She swallowed hard. I know you don't want to hear it, but I'm sorry. I loved you. I still do. He exhaled like he'd been punched. She covered her face with her hands, humiliated. I ruined everything. I know that. He didn't deny it, didn't reassure her. He just listened. When he finally spoke, his voice was wrecked. Was any of it true? She dropped her hands. Her eyes shone with tears. All of it. He closed his eyes, Joe working. Then why? She nearly choked on the words. Because I was scared. Because I was selfish. Because I wanted to be someone. Because I'm a coward. She pressed a hand to her chest. But I loved you more than anything. She sobbed once. That's the worst part. It was real. He stayed silent, but his eyes glistened too. She turned to leave. She couldn't stand it. But he caught her wrist. Not hard. Just enough. Wait. She froze. He looked at her, devastation in every line of his face. I don't know if I can forgive you. She nodded. I wouldn't either. Tears slipped down her cheeks. But you deserve the truth. She pulled free and walked back inside before he could see her truly fall apart. She didn't look back. But she felt his eyes on her the whole way. They avoided each other the rest of the night. When she got home, she threw up. She curled on the floor and shook. But something in her felt lighter. The truth was out. There was no more pretending. No more hiding. She felt raw, scraped to the bone. But also cleaner. She knew he wouldn't call. Wouldn't want to see her again. But for once, she didn't blame him. She just let herself grieve without lies. Days passed. Then weeks. She heard nothing. She went to work. She slept more. Ate better. Paid her bills. She didn't check her phone as much. Didn't linger in places they'd been. She started writing again, small things. Stories without romance. Just people trying. Healing. She didn't let herself imagine him reading them. She didn't let herself hope. But she did let herself live. even if it felt like punishment some days, even if she still wore his hoodie on bad nights. One rainy afternoon, she found an envelope under her door. No name on it. She nearly threw it away, but something made her open it. Inside was a note in his handwriting. "I don't know if I can forgive you, but I wanted you to know I heard you, and I believe you love me. That matters." She read it until the ink smeared from her tears. She didn't reply. She just pressed it to her chest and let herself feel it. All of it. The pain. The small, impossible grace of it. Arthur didn't know if he could forgive her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But he found himself rereading her words in his head. "I loved you." That's the worst part. He'd hear her voice at odd hours. He'd see her in the corner of his eye when he read bedtime stories to Julia. He didn't want to be the man who closed every door. He didn't want to teach Julia that love was impossible after betrayal. So he left a note. It was the most he could do. The least he could do. Months later, he saw her at another event. They didn't speak, just nodded quietly. He noticed she looked healthier, stronger. She noticed he was smiling with Julia. They both looked away at the same time. Neither of them knew what it meant. It wasn't a reunion. It wasn't absolution. It was just recognition. A soft ache. A possibility. They both felt it. And let it be. She kept the note in her wallet, worn at the creases. When things were hard, she'd read it. Not to absolve herself, but to remember she was capable of love that was true, even if she ruined it. She learned to live with the contradiction. That you could love someone and still destroy them. That forgiveness wasn't owed. But hope, maybe, could survive anyway. Even if it was fragile. Even if it was slow. And he kept her letters too. Even the ones she sent too late. He didn't read them often. But he didn't throw them away. Some nights, he'd hold one and sigh. He told himself he'd moved on. That he was better without her. But he couldn't make himself hate her completely. Because hate needed certainty. And all he had left was the gray space between love and betrayal. Between goodbye and maybe. In that space, they both continued. Not together. But not completely apart. Two broken people trying to be better. Trying to make peace with what they'd done. And maybe, just maybe, leaving the door open. Not for tomorrow, but for someday.